In the sprawling junk markets of Kepler Station, where alien merchants hawk salvaged starship parts and discarded military hardware, most buyers know the golden rule: if something costs only 3 credits and comes with a useless tag, there's usually a very good reason. But Marcus Chen, a third-generation human mechanic scraping by in the Outer Rim, has always believed that one being's trash might be another's treasure. What he doesn't know is that the small, scarred creature huddled in the corner of Rex's exotic livestock pen, it's a Draconis Rex, a member of the most feared and respected warrior race in galactic history, believed extinct for over 2 centuries. The creature's eyes hold intelligence that cuts through pretense, pain that speaks of betrayal, and a spark of something ancient that recognizes genuine kindness when it encounters it. When Marcus offers not just credits but respect to a being the entire galaxy has written off as worthless, he unknowingly awakens something that will shake the foundations of interstellar civilization. Some bonds transcend species. Some debts can only be paid in blood. And sometimes the most powerful forces in the universe come in the smallest, most overlooked packages. The dragon is about to remember who it truly is, and the galaxy is about to remember why dragons were once the stuff of legends. Marcus Chen wiped grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better decades, squinting at the power coupling he'd been trying to repair for the past 3 hours. The fluorescent lights of his cramped repair bay flickered occasionally, casting dancing shadows across the cluttered workspace. Tools hung from magnetic strips on the walls, and half-dismantled starship components occupied every available surface. The air smelled of ozone, metal polish, and the distinctive bite of coolant fluid. His stomach growled, reminding him that breakfast had consisted of nothing more than recycled coffee and optimism. The Stellar Drift, a aging cargo hauler, had been his home and business for 5 years now, but lately both seemed to be failing him simultaneously. The ship's environmental systems needed an overhaul he couldn't afford, and paying customers were becoming as rare as honest politicians. The comm unit crackled to life, startling him from his brooding. "Chad, you available for a pickup run?" The voice belonged to Captain Sarah Morrison, one of the few independent traders who still threw work his way. Marcus activated the reply channel. "Depends on what you're hauling and where you're going. Nothing exotic? Just need someone to ferry a batch of salvaged components from Kepler Station to the mining colonies in the Arcturus system. Standard rate, but I can pay half up front." The mention of upfront payment caught his attention immediately. Most of his clients preferred to settle accounts after delivery, which often meant waiting weeks for payment. "What's the catch?" Sarah's laugh crackled through the static. "No catch. The components are legitimate salvage, all properly documented. The miners are desperate enough to pay premium rates for anything that might keep their equipment running. You interested?" Marcus glanced around his workshop, mentally calculating how much longer he could keep the lights on without an infusion of credits. "Tomorrow morning, if possible. Dock 17. The seller is of Rex named Gorthak. Tell him Morrison sent you, and he'll give you the manifest." "Understood. Morrison, out." Marcus set down his tools and began the process of preparing the Stellar Drift for departure. The ship wasn't much to look at. A battered, consolidated Dynamics freighter that had seen service in 3 different conflicts before being decommissioned and sold to civilian operators. But she was reliable, and more importantly, she was his. The journey to Kepler Station took 18 hours through hyperspace, giving Marcus plenty of time to review the navigation charts and plan his route to the Arcturus system. Kepler Station occupied a strategic position along several major trade routes, making it a natural hub for commerce, both legitimate and otherwise. The station's massive rotating sections provided artificial gravity for over 2 million inhabitants. As the Stellar Drift dropped out of hyperspace, Marcus felt the familiar thrill of seeing the station materialize against the starfield. Kepler Station resembled a vast mechanical flower, with habitat modules and docking arms extending from a central hub. Ships of every conceivable design clustered around the docking ports: sleek diplomatic cruisers, heavily armed corporate security vessels, and countless smaller craft like his own. Kepler Station Control. This is cargo hauler Stellar Drift requesting docking clearance. Stellar Drift, You are cleared for docking bay 17. Please maintain approach speed and follow the guidance beacons. Welcome to Kepler Station. Marcus guided his ship through the designated approach corridor, watching as the massive docking bay doors opened to accommodate his vessel. Magnetic clamps engaged with a satisfying thunk, and the airlock cycled through their connection sequence. Within minutes, he was breathing station air and making his way through the bustling corridors toward the commercial sector. Kepler Station's commercial district never slept. Merchants from across the galaxy hawked their wares in a cacophony of languages, while customers of every conceivable species browsed the endless array of goods. The air thrummed with conversation, laughter, and the occasional argument over pricing. Holographic displays advertised everything from military-grade weapons to exotic foodstuffs. Finding Gorthak's establishment took longer than expected. The Vrex had set up shop in one of the station's less reputable sections, where the lighting was dimmer and security patrols were less frequent. The sign above his door simply read, "Salvage and Acquisitions," in several languages, including the flowing script of the Vrex homeworld. The shop's interior was a maze of shelves and display cases filled with starship components, personal weapons, and various pieces of technology that Marcus couldn't immediately identify. The air carried the scent of ozone and something vaguely organic that he preferred not to contemplate too closely. Gorthak himself was a typical representative of his species, tall and thin with elongated limbs and skin that shifted color depending on his emotional state. Currently, his hide displayed the mottled green and brown pattern that indicated cautious interest. "You are Chen?" the Vrex asked, his voice carrying the characteristic whistle that resulted from his species' unique vocal structure. "That's right. Morrison sent me to pick up a shipment of salvaged components." Gorthak's skin shifted toward a more settled blue-green. Yes. I have everything prepared. Good quality components, all documented and legal. The miners will be very satisfied." The Vrex led him toward the rear of the shop, past displays of exotic artifacts and mechanical curiosities. As they walked, Marcus noticed a smaller section that seemed devoted to living creatures rather than technology. Transparent containment units held various alien species, most of which appeared to be either decorative pets or food animals. "You deal in livestock, too?" Marcus asked, more out of curiosity than any real interest. "Occasionally, when I encounter interesting specimens during my acquisition runs. Most species make suitable companions for long-haul spacers, though some are more trouble than they are worth." They reached a loading area where several crates waited on a hover dolly. Gorthak handed Marcus a data pad containing the manifest and shipping documents. As Marcus reviewed the paperwork, his attention was drawn to a small containment unit sitting off to one side. The creature inside was unlike anything he had seen before. About the size of a house cat, it possessed a distinctly reptilian appearance, with scales that seemed to shimmer between black and deep purple. Its head was proportionally larger than expected, with intelligent golden eyes that tracked his movements with unmistakable awareness. Small ridges ran along its spine, and its tail ended in what appeared to be a cluster of flexible spines. What struck Marcus most forcefully was the creature's posture. It sat with a dignity that seemed almost regal, despite the obvious signs of mistreatment. Scars marked its hide, and one wing hung at an odd angle that suggested old injury. Most disturbing was the collar around its neck, a crude device that pulsed with energy at regular intervals. "What's that one?" Marcus asked, nodding toward the containment unit. Gorthak's skin shifted toward yellow, indicating embarrassment or discomfort. "A failed acquisition. I was told it was a rare decorative pet from the Andromeda systems, but it has proven completely unsuitable. Aggressive, refuses to eat properly, and makes the most disturbing sounds during the night cycle." Marcus stepped closer to the containment unit. The creature's golden eyes met his, and for a moment he felt an almost electric connection, as if something ancient and powerful was taking his measure. There was intelligence in that gaze, and something else, a profound sadness that spoke of loss and betrayal. "The collar," Marcus began. "Behavioral modification device. Prevents aggressive tendencies, or so I was told. It seems to have little effect beyond causing the creature obvious discomfort. The implications of that statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. This wasn't a pet or a decorative animal. This was a sentient being who had been enslaved and tortured. The realization made his stomach clench with anger. How much? He heard himself asking. Gorthak's skin shifted through several color combinations that indicated confusion and calculation. You wish to purchase this creature? I warn you, it has been nothing but trouble. 3 credits, and I will consider myself fortunate to be rid of it. 3 credits. Less than the cost of a decent meal. Marcus pulled out his credit chip without hesitation. Done, and I want that collar removed. The collar is integrated into the containment protocol. Remove it, and the creature will need to be transferred immediately to alternate restraints. No restraints, just remove the collar. Gorthak's skin displayed the swirling patterns that indicated extreme agitation. That would be most unwise. This creature may appear small, but I assure you it is capable of considerable violence. Remove the collar, or the deal is off. The Vrex muttered something in his native language that probably wasn't complimentary, but he activated a control device that caused the collar to emit a brief whine before splitting open and falling away. The creature's reaction was immediate. It straightened slightly, and some of the tension seemed to leave its posture. Marcus knelt beside the containment unit, bringing himself to eye level with the creature. I'm going to open this, he said quietly, speaking as much to reassure himself as to communicate with the being inside. I'm not going to hurt you. The creature tilted its head slightly, a gesture that seemed almost human in its curiosity. Marcus activated the containment unit's release mechanism, and the transparent barrier retracted with a soft hiss. For several seconds, neither of them moved. The creature remained sitting, watching Marcus with those remarkable golden eyes, while Marcus fought the urge to reach out and touch it. Finally, the creature took a tentative step forward, then another, until it was standing just outside the containment unit. What do you call yourself? Farkas asked, feeling somewhat foolish for talking to what might be an animal, but convinced that the intelligence he saw deserved acknowledgement. The creature opened its mouth and made a sound unlike anything Marcus had ever heard, a complex, harmonious tone that seemed to carry layers of meaning. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, like distant thunder mixed with wind chimes. I'll call you Harmony, Marcus said, if that's acceptable to you. The creature, Harmony, made the sound again, but shorter and somehow more musical. If Marcus didn't know better, he would have sworn it was expressing approval. Gorthak had been watching this exchange with growing agitation, his skin cycling through warning colors. The transfer is complete. The creature is now your responsibility. I strongly recommend immediate restraint protocols. That won't be necessary, Marcus replied, standing slowly. Harmony remained where she was, but her head turned to track his movements. Marcus completed the transaction for the salvage components and began loading them onto his cargo dolly. Harmony followed at a discreet distance, staying close enough to maintain visual contact but far enough away to avoid appearing threatening. Her movements were fluid and graceful despite her obvious injuries. The journey back to his ship provided Marcus with his first real opportunity to observe his unexpected companion. Harmony seemed fascinated by the station's environment, her head turning constantly to take in new sights and sounds. Several times Marcus noticed other beings giving them a wide berth, as if some instinct warned them away from the small creature. Back aboard the Stellar Drift, Marcus faced the practical challenge of accommodating a passenger he knew nothing about. He cleared a space in his personal quarters and laid down some soft material that might serve as a bed. Harmony investigated the area thoroughly before settling down with her back to the wall, positioned so she could observe the entire room. You must be hungry, Marcus said, realizing he had no idea what the creature might eat. His own food supplies consisted mainly of standard human rations and some freeze-dried proteins. Let's see what we can figure out. He offered small portions of various foods, watching carefully for any reaction that might indicate preference or toxicity. Harmony sniffed each offering delicately, rejecting most but showing interest in the protein rations and a fruit-based energy bar. As the ship prepared for departure, Marcus found himself talking to Harmony about his plans for the delivery run and his concerns about the ship's aging systems. She listened with apparent attention, occasionally making soft, harmonious sounds that he chose to interpret as responses. It wasn't until they were several hours into hyperspace that Marcus realized how profoundly his life had changed. He had rescued what he initially thought was an abused pet, but as he watched Harmony move around his quarters with increasing confidence, he began to suspect there was much more to her than met the eye. The way she studied the ship's control interfaces suggested technical understanding. Her reactions to various stimuli indicated not just intelligence but sophisticated reasoning capability. Most tellingly, there were moments when she looked at him with an expression that seemed almost protective, as if she had appointed herself as his guardian. Marcus had always prided himself on being a practical man, someone who dealt with facts and avoided flights of fancy. But as he sat in his pilot's chair listening to Harmony's soft, harmonious sounds from the quarters behind him, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had stumbled into something far larger and more significant than a simple rescue. The stars streamed past his viewport as the stellar drift carried them toward the Arcturus system, and Marcus Chen found himself wondering not what he had gotten himself into, but what ancient and powerful force had just entered his life. Behind him, Harmony settled into sleep, but even in rest, her posture remained alert and ready. And if Marcus could have seen the faint luminescence that occasionally flickered along her scaled hide, or noticed the way the ship's electronic systems seemed to respond more smoothly to his commands when she was nearby, he might have realized that his life had just become infinitely more complicated and far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The mining colony of New Prosperity looked exactly like what it was, a hastily constructed settlement on a barely habitable rock designed for maximum resource extraction with minimal investment in comfort. As the stellar drift approached the designated landing pad, Marcus could see the sprawling complex of prefabricated buildings, massive excavation equipment, and the constant stream of transport vehicles moving ore from the mining sites to the processing facilities. Harmony had spent the 3-day journey exploring every accessible area of the ship, displaying a curiosity that bordered on analytical study. Marcus had caught her examining the navigation computer with particular interest, her golden eyes tracking the display patterns with unmistakable comprehension. More than once he had found her positioned near critical ship systems during routine maintenance, watching his work with the focused attention of a student learning from a master. "We're coming up on the landing pad," Marcus announced, though he had fallen into the habit of providing running commentary throughout the journey. Harmony had moved to her usual position during approach and docking procedures, seated near the pilot station where she could observe his actions while remaining safely out of the way. The landing proceeded normally, though Marcus noticed that the ship's attitude thrusters seemed more responsive than usual. He attributed this to his recent maintenance work, though a part of his mind noted that the improvement had begun only after Harmony started her systematic exploration of the ship. The colony's chief engineer, a gruff human named Davidson, met them at the landing pad with a small crew and a cargo hauler. Davidson was a veteran of the Outer Rim mining operations, his weathered face and permanently grease-stained coveralls telling the story of decades spent keeping machinery functional in hostile environments. "Morrison said you'd have some components that might help us with our excavator problems." "That's right, standard salvage manifest, all documented and certified." Marcus handed over the datapad containing the shipping information. Davidson reviewed the manifest with the careful attention of someone who had learned that details mattered, when equipment failure could mean the difference between profit and disaster. His expression gradually brightened as he read through the component specifications. "This is good stuff," he admitted, "better than I hoped. Morrison came through for us again." As Davidson's crew began transferring the cargo, Marcus noticed several of the workers glancing nervously toward his ship. Their behavior seemed odd until he realized that Harmony had appeared in the cargo bay doorway, her distinctive silhouette clearly visible against the ship's interior lighting. "What the hell is that?" Davidson asked, his voice carrying a note of alarm that seemed disproportionate to Harmony's small size. "A companion animal? She's harmless." Davidson's expression remained troubled, but he didn't pursue the matter further. The cargo transfer proceeded efficiently, though Marcus noticed that the workers gave his ship an unusually wide berth whenever possible. Payment was transferred to Marcus's credit account without incident, and he was preparing to depart when Davidson approached him again, this time alone. Chen, I don't know what that thing is you're carrying, but I've been working the Outer Rim for 30 years. Some instincts you develop out here, they keep you alive when regulations and procedures aren't enough. I'm not sure what you're getting at. That creature makes my skin crawl, and I can't explain why. It's not natural. Whatever it is, be careful. Davidson walked away before Marcus could respond, leaving him standing beside his ship with a growing sense of unease. The warning had been delivered with the serious tone of someone passing on vital survival information, not casual prejudice against exotic species. Back aboard the Stellar Drift, Marcus found Harmony in his quarters, positioned at the small viewport where she could observe the colony's activities. Her posture suggested intense concentration, as if she were studying the human settlement with professional interest. "Davidson thinks you're dangerous," Marcus said, settling into his desk chair. "Are you?" Harmony turned to look at him, her golden eyes reflecting an emotional complexity that no simple animal should possess. She made one of her harmonious sounds, a longer, more intricate sequence that seemed to carry layers of meaning. "I wish I could understand what you're trying to tell me," he admitted. "Sometimes I feel like we're having a real conversation, and other times I wonder if I'm just projecting human characteristics onto an alien species." The response was immediate and unmistakable. Harmony moved closer to the desk and, after a moment of apparent consideration, placed one clawed hand on Marcus's data pad. The device activated instantly, displaying the ship's navigation interface. Using movements that were clearly deliberate and precise, Harmony manipulated the controls to bring up a star chart. Marcus watched in fascination as she zoomed the display to show a region of space far beyond the established trade routes. The stellar cartography was unfamiliar, showing systems that weren't included in standard navigation databases. Harmony indicated a particular star system with what appeared to be great significance, her harmonious vocalizations taking on an urgent quality. "You're trying to tell me something about this place," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is important to you." Harmony made a sound that somehow conveyed affirmation, then returned her attention to the star chart. The system she had indicated was listed in the database as unexplored, though Marcus noted that its coordinates placed it in a region of space that had been the subject of numerous expedition reports over the past century. Most of those expeditions had failed to return. The implications were staggering. Not only was Harmony clearly intelligent and capable of operating sophisticated technology, but she possessed knowledge of stellar navigation that exceeded the capabilities of most sentient species. The creature he had rescued for 3 credits might be the most valuable being in known space. That realization brought with it a wave of protective instinct that surprised Marcus with its intensity. Whatever Harmony was, whatever knowledge she possessed, she had trusted him enough to reveal her capabilities. That trust carried responsibilities he was only beginning to understand. The ship's communication system activated with an incoming priority message. Marcus accepted the transmission, and Captain Morrison's voice filled the cabin. "Chen, I've got another job if you're interested. The pay is exceptional, but the client is requesting transport to a destination that's outside normal shipping lanes." "How far outside?" "The Helix Nebula region. System designation NGC-SEB 7293. The client is willing to pay triple standard rates for immediate departure and guaranteed discretion." Marcus glanced at Harmony, who had turned to focus on the communication with obvious interest. The system Morrison had mentioned wasn't far from the area Harmony had indicated on the star chart. What kind of client pays triple rates for transport to an uninhabited system? The kind that prefers not to answer detailed questions. The cargo is listed as personal effects and research materials, nothing hazardous or illegal according to the manifest. Marcus considered the offer carefully. The payment would be enough to fund several months of operations, possibly enough to afford the ship upgrades he desperately needed. But the timing seemed suspicious, coming so soon after Harmony's revelation about her knowledge of that region of space. "I'll take the job," he decided. "Where do I pick up the client?" "Kepler Station. Dock 17. Same seller as before. Gorthak. The client will be waiting there tomorrow." The transmission ended, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and Harmony's watchful presence. The coincidence seemed too convenient to ignore, a high-paying transport job to the same region of space that had captured Harmony's attention. "This isn't a coincidence, is it?" he asked aloud. Harmony's response was a complex sequence of harmonious tones that seemed to carry both agreement and warning. The journey back to Kepler Station gave Marcus time to consider the rapidly accumulating mystery surrounding his unusual passenger. Harmony's behavior had evolved noticeably during their brief time together. She moved through the ship with increasing confidence, and her interactions with the various systems had taken on a distinctly proprietary quality. Most significantly, Marcus had begun to notice improvements in the ship's performance that couldn't be explained by his recent maintenance work. The environmental systems ran more efficiently, the navigation computer responded more quickly to commands, and the hyperspace engine seemed to achieve better fuel economy than the technical specifications suggested possible. When he mentioned these observations to Harmony, her response was a series of soft, harmonious sounds that he chose to interpret as modest acknowledgement of responsibility. The implications were profound. She wasn't just observing the ship's systems, she was somehow optimizing their performance. The docking at Kepler Station proceeded without incident, though Marcus noticed that station traffic control seemed unusually curious about his passenger manifest. The questions were subtle, but they suggested someone was monitoring movements of unusual cargo or passengers. Gorthak's shop appeared unchanged from their previous visit, though the Vrex himself seemed agitated when Marcus arrived. His skin displayed the rapid color fluctuations that indicated extreme stress, and his movements carried the jerky quality of someone operating under significant pressure. "Chen," Gorthak said, without preamble, "your client is waiting in the private conference room. I must warn you, this individual represents interests that prefer to avoid official scrutiny." "What kind of interests?" "The kind that ask few questions but pay very well for services rendered. Be cautious in your dealings." Gorthak led him to a small room in the rear of the shop, its walls lined with sound-dampening material that suggested regular use for sensitive conversations. The client was already seated at the room's single table, a tall, humanoid figure wearing concealing robes that obscured both species and gender. "You are Chen," the figure said, its voice artificially modulated to prevent identification. "I require transport to the NGC-ZLM 7293 system. The journey must be completed with absolute discretion." Morrison mentioned research materials and personal effects. "What exactly am I transporting?" "Items of historical significance. Nothing dangerous or illegal, but extremely valuable to certain academic institutions." The figure placed a credit chip on the table. "Payment in advance, as promised. Triple standard rates for a simple transport job." Marcus examined the credit chip, confirming that it contained the agreed-upon amount. The payment was generous enough to cover his ship's operating expenses for months, but his instincts warned him that nothing was ever simple when clients insisted on anonymity. "When do you want to depart?" "Immediately. My cargo is already prepared for loading." The cargo turned out to be a collection of sealed containers ranging from small personal lockboxes to larger storage units that required mechanical handling equipment. The client supervised the loading process personally, though their attention seemed focused less on the cargo itself than on the surrounding area, as if watching for unwanted observers. Throughout the loading procedure, Marcus noticed Harmony observing from the ship's cargo bay. Her posture suggested intense interest, and several times he caught her focusing on specific containers with what appeared to be recognition. The implications of that observation sent a chill down his spine. Once the cargo was secured and the client had settled into the passenger quarters, Marcus began the departure procedures. Harmony had taken her usual position near the pilot station, but her demeanor seemed different, more alert, almost anticipatory. "You know something about our passenger, don't you?" Marcus asked quietly, speaking in a tone that wouldn't carry beyond the cockpit. Harmony's response was a low, complex, harmonic sequence that somehow conveyed both affirmation and warning. Her golden eyes reflected an intelligence that had grown more apparent with each passing day, and Marcus found himself wondering again what manner of being he had rescued from Gorthak's shop. The departure from Kepler Station proceeded normally, though Marcus noticed several security patrols maintaining unusually close observation of his ship during the exit sequence. Once they had cleared the station's traffic control zone and made the transition to hyperspace, he activated the ship's internal security protocols and settled in for the journey to NGC 7. The mysterious client remained in their quarters for most of the trip, emerging only for meals and brief periods of observation from the ship's common areas. During these appearances, Marcus noticed that Harmony's behavior became distinctly protective, positioning herself where she could monitor both the passenger and the approaches to Marcus's quarters. 2 days into the journey, Marcus was performing routine maintenance when he discovered something that made his blood run cold. One of the cargo containers had been subtly modified, its locking mechanism replaced with a device that would respond to remote activation. The modification was sophisticated, nearly invisible unless examined closely, and clearly designed to allow the contents to be accessed without the knowledge of the transport crew. The discovery transformed his understanding of the situation. This wasn't a simple transport job. It was a carefully orchestrated operation designed to move sensitive materials to a specific location while maintaining plausible deniability for all parties involved. His ship was being used as an unwitting courier for cargo that was almost certainly illegal. Harmony had appeared beside him during his examination of the modified container, her harmonious vocalizations taking on a distinctly agitated quality. When Marcus looked into her golden eyes, he saw an intelligence that understood exactly what they had discovered and recognized the danger it represented. "We're in trouble, aren't we?" he asked quietly. Harmony's response left no room for doubt. The soft, harmonious sounds that had become familiar carried an unmistakable tone of agreement and warning. Whatever cargo they were carrying, whatever destination they were approaching, the situation was far more dangerous than he had realized. As the stellar drift continued its journey through hyperspace toward the NGC 7293 system, Marcus Chen found himself caught between the obligations of a transport contract and the growing certainty that he had been manipulated into participating in something that would change his life forever. The small creature sitting beside him might hold the key to understanding what was happening, but first he would have to survive whatever waited for them at their destination. The NGC 7293 system emerged from hyperspace like a revelation painted in impossible colors. The central star burned with a brilliant white-blue radiance that made the ship's viewport filters automatically engage, while the surrounding nebula created cascades of luminescent gas that shifted through every conceivable hue. It was beautiful in a way that made Marcus understand why early explorers had called it the Eye of God. But Harmony's reaction to their arrival was anything but peaceful. The moment the ship dropped out of hyperspace, she began making sounds unlike anything Marcus had heard from her before. Complex, harmonious sequences that carried undertones of recognition, sorrow, and something that might have been rage. Her entire posture changed, becoming more erect and somehow more regal, as if the familiar environment had awakened aspects of her nature that had been dormant. "You know this place," Marcus said, watching her golden eyes track across the starfield with unmistakable familiarity. "This is important to you." Her response was a long, mournful sound that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. For the first time since he had rescued her, Marcus felt that he was seeing Harmony's true nature, something far older and more significant than the injured creature he had found in Gorthak's shop. The mysterious client emerged from their quarters, moving to the observation deck where they could see the spectacular vista of the nebula. Through the concealing robes, Marcus caught glimpses of what appeared to be sophisticated sensor equipment, suggesting that their passengers' interest in this region was more than casual tourism. "Proceed to coordinates 847-3 by 221.7, the client instructed, their artificially modulated voice carrying a note of satisfaction. "There should be a planetary body at that location." Marcus input the coordinates and engaged the ship's sublight engines. As they moved deeper into the system, long-range sensors began detecting the presence of artificial structures, clearly constructed objects that had no business existing in an allegedly unexplored region of space. "Those are space stations," Marcus said, studying the sensor readouts with growing amazement. "Multiple installations, some of them massive. This system isn't uninhabited. It's been extensively developed. The client moved closer to the sensor displays, their attention focused on the emerging data with obvious fascination. Proceed to the largest installation. They will be expecting us. The largest structure resolved into a space station of truly impressive proportions. A massive construct that combined elegant curves with brutally functional architecture. As they approached, Marcus could see that the station incorporated design elements he didn't recognize, suggesting technology that was either very advanced or very old. Possibly both. Docking clearance came through automated systems that communicated in standard galactic languages, but Marcus noticed that the underlying protocols were more sophisticated than anything he had encountered before. The station's traffic control system seemed to be analyzing his ship in real time, gathering detailed information about its systems and capabilities. Harmony's agitation had increased as they approached the station, her harmonious sounds taking on a distinctly urgent quality. When Marcus looked at her, he saw something in her golden eyes that might have been recognition mixed with fear. Whatever this place was, it held profound significance for her. The docking bay they were directed to was clearly designed to accommodate ships much larger than the stellar drift, its curved walls rising high overhead to create a space that could have housed a small city. The bay's architecture was elegant and organic, suggesting aesthetic sense that valued beauty as well as functionality. As the ship's systems completed their shutdown sequence, Marcus noticed that their mysterious client had begun unpacking equipment from the personal lockboxes. The devices were clearly sophisticated, scanning instruments, communication arrays, and what appeared to be weapons of a design he didn't recognize. "This is where we part company," the client announced. "The cargo will be collected by station personnel. Your payment includes compensation for the return journey, though you are free to depart immediately if you prefer." "What is this place?" Marcus asked, his curiosity finally overcoming his professional discretion. The client paused in their equipment preparation, and for a moment the concealing robes shifted enough to reveal what appeared to be scales rather than skin. When they spoke again, their artificial voice modulation couldn't quite hide the undertones of excitement and anticipation. "This is Draconum Prime, the lost homeworld of the most magnificent species ever to grace the galaxy. We are here to reclaim what was stolen from us." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Draconum Prime, the legendary homeworld of the Draconis Rex, the warrior philosophers whose civilization had dominated half the galaxy before mysteriously vanishing over 2 centuries ago. According to historical records, the entire species had simply disappeared, leaving behind only ruins and legends. Marcus looked at Harmony with sudden, shocking understanding. Her reptilian features, her obvious intelligence, her knowledge of this region of space, her reaction to being freed from the behavioral control collar, everything suddenly made perfect sense. The creature he had rescued for 3 credits wasn't just any alien animal. She was a Draconis Rex, a member of the most feared and respected warrior race in galactic history. "You're one of them," he whispered, staring at Harmony with new eyes. "You're a dragon." Harmony's response was unlike anything she had produced before, a sound that was part roar, part song, and entirely magnificent. It resonated through the ship's hull with such power that Marcus felt it in his bones, and for a moment he glimpsed the true nature of the being he had befriended. This wasn't a small, injured creature seeking protection. This was Apex Predator, a being whose species had once ruled the stars. The client had gone still at the sound, their concealed form radiating sudden tension. "Impossible," they said, their voice modulation failing entirely to reveal what sounded like multiple speakers in harmony. "The last of the Draconis Rex died decades ago. Our sources confirmed the completion of the extermination protocols." "Extermination protocols?" Marcus repeated, feeling ice form in his stomach. The cleansing of this region was necessary to prevent any survivors from reclaiming their ancestral technology. The galaxy is better served with the dragons extinct. The revelation transformed everything Marcus thought he understood about the situation. Their client wasn't an academic researcher. They were part of whatever organization had been responsible for the genocide of an entire species, and Harmony wasn't just a refugee. She might be the last surviving member of her people, Harmony had moved closer to Marcus, her posture distinctly protective. The sound she was making had taken on a different quality, still harmonious, but with an underlying threat that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. For the first time, Marcus truly understood what Davidson had meant about instinctive warnings. Some part of his primitive brain was screaming danger signals, recognizing the presence of a predator whose species had evolved to be the ultimate apex hunters. Station personnel arrived to collect the cargo. Tall, elegant beings whose concealing environmental suits couldn't quite hide their reptilian characteristics. They moved with fluid grace and obvious technological sophistication, but Marcus noticed that they gave Harmony an extremely wide berth, as if her presence made them profoundly uncomfortable. "The situation has become complicated," the lead figure announced, their voice carrying harmonious undertones that reminded Marcus of Harmony's vocalizations. "The presence of a survivor requires immediate consultation with higher authorities." The client's agitation was now clearly visible despite their concealing robes. This was not part of the agreement. The cleansing was supposed to be complete. Apparently not, the station representative replied with what sounded like satisfaction. "This individual will need to be processed according to established protocols for survivor encounters." Marcus felt Harmony press closer to his side, her harmonious sounds taking on a distinctly agitated quality. The way the station personnel were discussing her, as if she were a problem to be solved rather than a sentient being, triggered every protective instinct he possessed. "She's not going anywhere," Marcus said, his voice carrying a determination that surprised him. "Whatever protocols you're talking about, they don't apply here. She's under my protection." The station representatives exchanged what appeared to be significant glances, their body language suggesting rapid communication through methods Marcus couldn't detect. Finally, the lead figure addressed him directly. "You do not understand the magnitude of what you have discovered. This being possesses knowledge that could destabilize the carefully maintained balance of galactic civilization. She cannot be permitted to leave this system. Watch me." Marcus began backing toward his ship's entrance, keeping Harmony close beside him. Her harmonious vocalizations had taken on a rhythmic quality that seemed almost like a countdown, and he noticed that the ship's systems were responding more efficiently than ever before. Whatever abilities Harmony possessed, she was preparing to use them. The station personnel moved to block their retreat, but their movement seemed oddly hesitant, as if they were reluctant to get too close to Harmony despite their numerical advantage. The mysterious client had begun activating their sophisticated equipment, directing scanning beams toward Harmony with obvious scientific interest. "Fascinating," the client said, their voice modulation completely abandoned to reveal the complex harmonious tones of what was clearly another Draconis Rex, a true survivor and apparently bonded to a human. The psychological implications are extraordinary. The revelation that their client was also a member of Harmony's species added another layer of complexity to an already impossible situation. Marcus found himself caught between different factions of what might be the last surviving members of a supposedly extinct civilization, with no clear understanding of their motivations or objectives. Harmony's response to the revelation was immediate and dramatic. She stepped forward, placing herself between Marcus and the disguised dragon, and produced a sound that was unmistakably a challenge. The harmonious qualities of her voice remained, but there was an underlying power that made the station's hull resonate like a struck bell. The client dragon stepped back, their own vocalizations taking on what sounded like defensive tones. "You dare challenge me, exile? You who were marked as unfit and cast out from our society?" Marcus felt pieces of the puzzle beginning to click into place. Harmony wasn't just a survivor of genocide. She was an exile, someone who had been cast out by her own people before the larger catastrophe had overtaken their civilization. The scars he had noticed, the behavioral modification collar, the way she had been reduced to a commodity worth only 3 credits, all of it spoke of systematic abuse and dehumanization. "What did they do to you?" he asked quietly, placing a protective hand on Harmony's scaled shoulder. Her response was a complex sequence of harmonious tones that somehow conveyed a story of betrayal, exile, and loss that made Marcus's heart clench with sympathy. She had been abandoned by her own people, left to suffer in captivity while her civilization collapsed around her. The station personnel were moving closer now, their initial hesitation overcome by apparent orders from higher authority. Marcus could see weapons being prepared, though their design was elegant enough to be mistaken for artwork. The situation was rapidly approaching a crisis point where violence seemed inevitable. "There's another option," Marcus announced, backing toward the ship's entrance. "We leave, all of us, right now." "That is not acceptable," the lead station representative replied. "The survivor must be processed according to established protocols. Her knowledge of ancestral technologies poses too great a risk to galactic stability. Then I guess we have a problem." Marcus reached the ship's entrance and activated the boarding ramp, keeping Harmony close beside him. Her harmonious sounds had taken on an almost musical quality, and he noticed that the ship's systems were responding to her presence with increasing efficiency. Lights flickered in patterns he didn't recognize, and the ambient hum of the engines seemed to be synchronizing with her vocalizations. The realization hit him like lightning. Harmony wasn't just operating the ship's systems, she was communicating with them. The improvements in performance he had noticed weren't coincidental. They were the result of direct interface between her nervous system and the ship's electronic infrastructure. "She's connected to the ship," he said aloud, understanding flooding through him. "She's been optimizing our systems because she can communicate directly with them." The station personnel had stopped their advance, their attention focused on the ship with what appeared to be growing concern. Marcus could see energy readings spiking on their scanning equipment, and several of them were making rapid gestures that suggested urgent communication. "The vessel is becoming unstable," one of them announced. "The survivor is accessing technologies that should not be possible." Harmony's vocalizations had reached a crescendo that made the ship's hull ring like a tuning fork. Every system aboard the Stellar Drift was now operating at peak efficiency, and Marcus could feel the raw power flowing through the ship's infrastructure. This was what Draconis Rex technology was truly capable of, not just advanced engineering, but direct biological interface with mechanical systems. The client Dragon had backed away from the ship, their own vocalizations taking on what sounded like warning tones. "You cannot control this," they called out. "The bonding process is irreversible. You will be consumed by forces you do not understand." But as Marcus looked at Harmony, he saw no loss of control or consciousness. Her golden eyes remained focused and aware, her posture confident and purposeful. Whatever was happening to the ship, she was directing it with conscious intent and complete awareness of the consequences. "I trust her," Marcus said simply, and activated the ship's launch sequence. The Stellar Drift lifted off from the station's docking bay with a grace and power that exceeded every specification in its technical manual. As they cleared the station's superstructure and moved into open space, Marcus realized that their ship had been fundamentally transformed. The readings on his control panels showed performance parameters that should have been impossible for a vessel of its class. But even as they accelerated away from Draconum Prime, Marcus knew that their escape was only the beginning of a much larger adventure. Harmony was the last free member of a species that had once ruled half the galaxy, and her knowledge of their technology represented power that could reshape civilizations. The forces that had sought to contain her would not give up easily, and the galaxy itself might never be the same. Behind them, the space station began launching pursuit vessels, their elegant forms cutting through the nebula with predatory grace. The hunt for the last dragon had begun, and Marcus Chen found himself at the center of a conflict that would determine the fate of entire civilizations. The pursuit ships emerged from Draconum Prime's superstructure like predators sensing wounded prey, their sleek forms cutting through the nebula's luminescent gases with deadly grace. Marcus watched the tactical display as 6 vessels, each significantly larger and more advanced than the Stellar Drift, arranged themselves in a classic pursuit formation designed to prevent escape through conventional hyperspace jumps. "They're boxing us in," Marcus observed, his hands dancing across the control interfaces as he tried to find an escape vector. The ship responded to his commands with unprecedented efficiency, but even optimized performance couldn't overcome the fundamental limitations of an aging cargo hauler against purpose-built interceptors. Harmony had positioned herself at the secondary control station, her clawed hands moving across the displays with fluid precision. The ship's systems hummed around her presence like a living thing, and Marcus could feel the raw power flowing through the infrastructure as she interfaced directly with the electronic systems. But even her remarkable abilities couldn't change the basic physics of their situation. The lead pursuit vessel opened a communication channel, and the harmonious voice of the disguised dragon filled the bridge. "You cannot escape, human. Return to the station and surrender the exile. Your cooperation will be noted favorably in our records." "Not happening," Marcus replied, continuing his evasive maneuvers as the pursuit ships tightened their formation. Harmony's vocalizations had taken on a complex rhythmic quality that seemed to resonate through the ship's hull. The displays around her showed patterns Marcus didn't recognize, cascading data streams that suggested she was accessing systems he didn't know existed. The realization that his ship possessed hidden capabilities was both exciting and terrifying. "What are you doing?" he asked, watching as new interface panels materialized on previously blank sections of the console. Harmony's response was a sequence of harmonious tones that somehow conveyed explanation despite the language barrier. As she worked, Marcus began to understand that the stellar drift had been more than just a surplus cargo hauler when he purchased it. Hidden beneath its mundane exterior were systems of Draconis Rex origin, technology so advanced that it had remained dormant until awakened by direct biological interface. The ship's performance readings spiked dramatically as Harmony's interface deepened. The pursuit vessels were maintaining their formation, but Marcus noticed that their targeting systems seemed to be having difficulty achieving solid locks on his ship. Whatever Harmony was doing to the stellar drift's signature, it was making them harder to track and target. "Impossible," came the voice from the lead pursuer. "No exile should possess the knowledge to activate ancestral protocols." A new voice joined the communication, older, carrying harmonious undertones that spoke of ancient authority. "The exile was cast out for refusing to accept the necessity of our withdrawal from galactic affairs. Her knowledge remains intact, though her judgment was deemed flawed." Marcus felt Harmony's posture stiffen at the sound of this new voice. Her vocalizations took on a distinctly agitated quality, suggesting recognition mixed with what might have been anger or pain. Whatever history existed between her and this new speaker, it was clearly complicated and emotionally charged. "You should not have survived the cleansing, young one," the ancient voice continued. "Your defiance has always been your weakness. Return now and face judgment with dignity." Harmony's response was a sound unlike anything Marcus had heard from her before, a roar that contained harmonious qualities but also raw, primal fury. The ship's systems resonated with the power of her voice, and every display on the bridge flickered as energy surged through the infrastructure. When the display stabilized, Marcus found himself looking at readouts that defied comprehension. The ship's engine output had increased by an order of magnitude, its defensive systems had activated capabilities that shouldn't exist on a civilian vessel, and the navigation computer was showing hyperspace vectors that led to regions of space not included in any standard star charts. "She's accessing the deep protocols," Marcus breathed, understanding flooding through him. "She's awakening technologies that have been sleeping in this ship for decades." The ancient voice from the pursuit fleet carried a note of what might have been approval mixed with concern. "The bonding process has progressed further than anticipated. The human is becoming integrated into the ship's biological systems." Marcus looked at his hands and realized with shock that the control interfaces were no longer purely mechanical. Organic-looking growths had begun to appear along the edges of the displays, and when he touched them, he could feel information flowing directly into his nervous system. The sensation was strange but not unpleasant, like suddenly developing a new sense that allowed him to perceive the ship's condition as an extension of his own body. "What's happening to me?" he asked, though part of him already understood. Harmony's response was a complex sequence of harmonious tones that conveyed explanation and reassurance. Through the growing biological interface, Marcus began to understand that Draconis Rex technology was designed to create symbiotic relationships. The ship wasn't just being operated, It was being inhabited, becoming a living extension of its crew's consciousness. The pursuit vessels had begun firing warning shots, their energy weapons creating brilliant flashes against the nebula's backdrop. The shots were precisely placed to avoid critical damage while demonstrating the overwhelming firepower difference between the opposing forces. Final warning, came the communication from the lead pursuer. Surrender immediately or face the consequences. Marcus felt the ship's defensive systems respond to the threat, energy shields materializing around the hull with power levels that exceeded anything in the stellar drift's original specifications. Through his deepening connection to the ship's systems, he could sense Harmony's presence guiding the awakening technologies with instinctive skill. "They're not going to let us go," he said, stating the obvious truth that had been clear from the beginning. Harmony's vocalizations took on a different quality. Determined, almost eager. Through the biological interface, Marcus felt her intentions flowing into the ship's systems. She wasn't planning to run from the pursuit vessels, she was preparing to fight them. The realization should have been terrifying. The stellar drift was still fundamentally a cargo hauler, regardless of what hidden capabilities Harmony had awakened. The pursuit vessels were military-grade interceptors with weapons designed to disable or destroy hostile targets. Any direct confrontation would be hopelessly one-sided. But as Marcus felt the ship's systems continuing to evolve under Harmony's guidance, he began to understand that he was no longer flying the same vessel he had purchased years earlier. The hidden Draconis Rex technology wasn't just advanced, it was transformative, capable of restructuring matter at the molecular level to create capabilities that hadn't existed moments before. "You want to fight them," Marcus said, reading Harmony's intentions through their shared connection to the ship. Her response was an affirmative harmonic sequence that carried undertones of long-suppressed rage. Through the biological interface, Marcus caught glimpses of her memories. Exile, betrayal, systematic abuse, and the knowledge that her own people had abandoned their responsibilities to the galaxy out of cowardice and self-interest. The ancient voice from the pursuit fleet seemed to sense the change in their situation. "The exile has chosen defiance over wisdom. Initiate containment protocols. The ship must be disabled before the bonding process reaches completion." The pursuit vessels opened fire in earnest, their energy weapons creating a devastating barrage that would have overwhelmed any conventional starship. But the stellar drift was no longer conventional. The energy shields that Harmony had awakened absorbed the incoming fire and converted it into power for the ship's rapidly evolving systems. Marcus felt his consciousness expanding as the biological interface deepened. He could sense every system aboard the ship, from the main engines to the smallest sensor array. More importantly, he could sense Harmony's presence as she guided the technological awakening with skills honed over centuries of experience. Through their shared connection, he began to understand the true scope of Draconis Rex capabilities. Their technology wasn't just advanced, it was alive, capable of growth, adaptation, and evolution in response to changing circumstances. The ships they had built weren't merely vehicles, they were partners, extensions of their pilot's consciousness that could achieve things impossible through purely mechanical means. The stellar drift's transformation accelerated as the pursuit continued. New weapon systems materialized along the hull, their organic curves blending seamlessly with the ship's original architecture. The engines developed additional thrust chambers that shouldn't have been able to fit within the existing framework. Most remarkably, the ship's superstructure began to strengthen and adapt, developing armor that could deflect the increasingly desperate attacks from the pursuit vessels. "This is magnificent," Marcus said, his voice carrying awe as he felt the ship's full potential awakening around them. Harmony's response was a complex harmonic sequence that conveyed satisfaction mixed with determination. Through their shared connection, Marcus understood that this was what she had been meant to do. Not cower in captivity or hide from her persecutors, but soar among the stars as a free being, bonded with a ship and crew that respected her true nature. The first pursuit vessel broke off its attack run, its pilot apparently unwilling to continue facing an opponent that was becoming more dangerous with each passing moment. The others maintained their formation, but their fire became more cautious, probing for weaknesses that were disappearing faster than they could be identified. "The transformation cannot be stopped," came the ancient voice, now carrying what sounded like resignation mixed with regret. "The exile has achieved full bonding with both vessel and crew. They have become something we chose to abandon long ago." "What did you abandon?" Marcus asked, directing his question toward the communication channel. "Our destiny," the voice replied. "We were meant to be guardians, protectors of the younger species as they develop their own capabilities. Instead, we chose isolation and eventually extinction, rather than face the responsibilities that came with our power." Through his connection to Harmony, Marcus felt the emotional weight of that statement. The Draconis Rex hadn't been destroyed by external enemies. They had destroyed themselves through cowardice and abandonment of their principles. Only the exiles like Harmony had maintained their commitment to the values that had once made their species great. The Stellar Drift's weapons systems had finished their development, and Marcus found himself in command of firepower that could challenge entire fleets. But more than that, he could sense the ship's eagerness to move beyond this confrontation toward larger purposes. The vessel had become something unprecedented, a fusion of human determination, Draconis Rex technology, and artificial intelligence that exceeded the sum of its parts. "We can destroy them," Marcus observed, reading the tactical possibilities from the ship's enhanced sensors. Harmony's response surprised him, a harmonious sequence that conveyed restraint and mercy rather than aggression. Through their shared connection, he understood that she had no desire for unnecessary violence. Despite the abuse she had suffered, her goal wasn't revenge. It was freedom and the chance to fulfill the responsibilities her people had abandoned. "Stand down," Marcus broadcast to the pursuit vessels. "We don't want to destroy you, but we won't be taken captive either. Let us leave in peace." The ancient voice responded after a long pause. "The exile has chosen her path. We cannot stop her, and perhaps we should not try. But know this. Young dragon, the galaxy will not welcome your return. The powers that currently rule will see you as a threat to their authority." "Then we'll have to change their minds," Marcus replied, feeling Harmony's approval flowing through their shared connection. The pursuit vessels began to withdraw, their elegant forms disappearing back toward Draconum Prime. The immediate threat was over, but Marcus knew that their real journey was just beginning. Harmony was the last free member of a species that had once been the galaxy's guardians, and together they had awakened technologies that could reshape civilizations. As the stellar drift turned toward open space, its transformed hull gleaming with organic curves and crystalline energy conduits, Marcus felt a sense of purpose that had been missing from his life for years. He was no longer just a freelance cargo hauler struggling to make ends meet. He was partner to a dragon crew member of a living ship, and guardian of knowledge that could restore balance to a galaxy that had lost its way. The stars stretched out before them, full of possibilities and challenges that would test everything they had become. But for the first time since rescuing Harmony from Gorthak's shop, Marcus felt ready for whatever the future might bring. 3 months after their escape from Draconum Prime, the transformed stellar drift emerged from hyperspace above the contested world of Meridian 7, where corporate security forces were locked in brutal conflict with civilian resistance fighters. The planet's surface glowed with the fires of orbital bombardment, and the debris field from destroyed ships created a deadly obstacle course for any vessel attempting to approach. Marcus felt the ship's living systems respond to his emotional state as he witnessed the destruction below. The biological interface that connected him to both Harmony and the vessel had deepened over their weeks together, creating a partnership that transcended anything he had imagined possible. Through their shared consciousness, he could sense Harmony's reaction to the suffering below, a mixture of sorrow and determination that reflected her species' ancient role as protectors. The Meridian Colonial Authority is using modified plasma bombardment against civilian population centers, the ship's enhanced sensors reported through his neural link. Estimated casualties exceed 200,000 and climbing. The information flowed directly into Marcus's consciousness through channels that hadn't existed in his brain 3 months earlier. The biological symbiosis with Draconis Rex technology had transformed him as much as it had the ship, granting him capabilities that blurred the line between organic and artificial intelligence. Harmony's presence in their shared mental space carried undertones of barely controlled fury. Through their connection, Marcus felt her memories of similar atrocities. Worlds burned, populations enslaved, entire species driven to extinction by those who possessed power but lacked wisdom. The corporate coalition that currently dominated galactic affairs had learned nothing from the mistakes that had led to the Draconis Rex withdrawal centuries earlier. "We can help them," Marcus said, though he wasn't speaking aloud. Communication between the three partners, human, dragon, and ship, had evolved beyond the need for words. The ship's response carried eagerness mixed with concern. Their transformed vessel possessed capabilities that could turn the tide of any conventional conflict, but using that power would reveal their presence to forces that had been hunting them across 3 star systems. The corporate coalition had placed bounties on their heads that exceeded the gross domestic product of most worlds. They need to know they're not alone, Harmony communicated through the shared consciousness, her harmonious thoughts carrying the weight of centuries of experience. "My people failed in their responsibilities by withdrawing from galactic affairs. We cannot make the same mistake." Marcus felt the rightness of her position resonating through their connection. The power they possessed came with obligations that couldn't be ignored, simply because fulfilling them was dangerous. The Draconis Rex had once served as guardians and arbiters, preventing the kind of systematic oppression that was consuming worlds like Meridian 7. The decision made itself through their shared consciousness, requiring no discussion or debate. The stellar drift began its approach toward the planet, its transformed hull adapting to provide maximum protection against the energy weapons that would soon be targeting them. The corporate coalition forces detected their approach immediately, their advanced sensors recognizing the ship's unique signature despite the stealth capabilities Harmony had awakened. Warning messages flooded the communication channels, followed quickly by weapons lock alerts as the orbital defense platforms prepared to engage. "Unknown vessel, you are entering a restricted combat zone. Withdraw immediately or face destruction." Marcus opened a communication channel, his voice carrying the authority that had grown within him over their months together. "This is the free ship Stellar Drift. We are here to offer humanitarian assistance to the civilian population. Negative. All traffic in this system is subject to corporate coalition authority. Submit to inspection or be fired upon." The ship's consciousness touched Marcus's mind with subtle amusement. The corporate coalition's most advanced weapons were toys compared to what their transformed vessel could bring to bear. The organic energy shields that Harmony had awakened could absorb enough firepower to level cities, while the crystalline weapon arrays that had grown along the hull could crack planets if used at full power. But raw, destructive capability wasn't their goal. The Draconis Rexway had always emphasized precision over brute force, protection of the innocent over punishment of the guilty. Their response needed to demonstrate strength while minimizing casualties among those who were simply following orders. The first wave of attacks came from orbital defense platforms, massive installations designed to prevent any unauthorized approach to the planet. Energy beams capable of vaporizing conventional starships struck the stellar drift's shields and simply disappeared, absorbed and converted into power for the ship's rapidly expanding capabilities. "Impossible," came the voice from the Coalition Command Center. "Those energy readings are beyond anything in our databases." "What kind of vessel is that?" Marcus felt Harmony's presence expand through the ship's systems, her consciousness flowing into every circuit and sensor array. Through their shared awareness, he watched as she began to demonstrate capabilities that had been myth to most galactic civilizations. The ship's hull began to glow with internal luminescence as organic weapon systems activated. But instead of returning fire on the defense platforms, Harmony directed the ship's power toward the planet's surface, where precision energy beams began striking military targets with surgical accuracy. Corporate coalition ground installations vanished in brilliant flashes of light, their weapons and shield generators disabled without harm to the personnel operating them. Command bunkers found their electronic systems mysteriously failing, while armored vehicles simply stopped functioning as their power systems were remotely shut down. "This is impossible," the Coalition commander broadcast on all frequencies. No known technology can achieve that level of precision targeting from orbital distance. Through the ship's enhanced sensors, Marcus could monitor the reaction of both sides to their intervention. Coalition forces were falling back in confusion as their equipment failed around them, while civilian resistance fighters emerged from hiding to reclaim positions they had been forced to abandon. But the most significant change was in the planet's communication networks. Reports of their intervention were spreading across every available channel, carrying hope to populations that had believed themselves abandoned by the galaxy. Other worlds under corporate coalition occupation were broadcasting requests for assistance, their transmissions carrying desperate pleas for the mysterious ship to come to their aid. "We've started something," Marcus observed through their shared consciousness. "This won't end with one world." Harmony's response carried satisfaction mixed with determination. Through their mental link, he felt her memories of what the galaxy had been like when her people had actively served as guardians. A time when conflicts like this had been prevented rather than allowed to escalate into systematic oppression. "The younger species need to know that resistance is possible," she communicated. "My people's withdrawal created a vacuum that was filled by those who value power over justice. That balance must be restored." The ship's consciousness added its own perspective, vast computational power that could model the ripple effects of their actions across thousands of star systems. Their intervention at Meridian 7 would inspire similar uprisings throughout Coalition space, but it would also trigger a coordinated response from forces that possessed resources they couldn't match through individual action. Additional corporate coalition vessels were already approaching the system. A full battle fleet that included some of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. The stellar drift could certainly defend itself against such forces, but the ensuing battle would cause casualties that neither Marcus nor Harmony was willing to accept. "We need allies," Marcus realized, watching the tactical display as more enemy ships dropped out of hyperspace. "We can't free an entire galaxy by ourselves." Harmony's response carried complex harmonics that suggested both agreement and hope. Through their shared connection, Marcus felt her accessing databases that had remained dormant in the ship's systems, records of other Draconis Rex exiles who might have survived the systematic purges, hidden colonies that had maintained their commitment to Guardian principles, and younger species that possessed the potential to develop their own protective capabilities. "There are others," she communicated, her thoughts carrying excitement mixed with uncertainty. The exile protocols created multiple hidden refuges throughout the galaxy. If they survived, if they maintained their principles, the possibility transformed their situation from hopeless resistance to the foundation of something much larger. The Draconis Rex had never been numerous. Their power had come from technology, wisdom, and the willing cooperation of the species they protected. If even a few of their hidden communities had survived, they could provide the nucleus for a new Guardian network. The approaching battle fleet was now within weapons range, their formation designed to prevent escape while concentrating maximum firepower on a single target. But instead of preparing for combat, the stellar drift began broadcasting on frequencies that hadn't been used for centuries. Ancient Draconis Rex communication protocols that would be recognized by any surviving members of their species. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hidden transmitters throughout the galaxy activated, their signals carrying location data for communities that had maintained their existence through centuries of secrecy. Exile colonies, research stations, and individual survivors began identifying themselves, creating a network of potential allies that spanned thousands of star systems. "We are not alone," Harmony's thoughts carried wonder mixed with joy. "The Guardians survived, scattered but unbroken. The network can be restored." But even as hope flourished through their shared consciousness, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. They had awakened something that could reshape galactic civilization, but success would require coordination, careful planning, and the ability to inspire others to risk everything for principles that had been nearly forgotten. The corporate coalition battle fleet opened fire as, one, their combined weapons creating a destructive barrage that could have sterilized the planet's surface. But the stellar drift was no longer where their sensors indicated. Its position shifted through capabilities that bent space itself. The ship had become something beyond conventional physics, a fusion of consciousness and technology that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "This is our declaration," Marcus broadcast on all frequencies, his voice carrying across the star system and beyond through networks that spanned the galaxy. "The age of unchallenged oppression is ending. The Guardians have returned, and we call upon all free beings to join us in restoring justice to the galaxy." The words were picked up by resistance networks, independent traders, and colonial governments that had chafed under corporate coalition rule. Within hours, they would spread to every inhabited system, carrying a message that had been absent for centuries: that protection was possible, that justice could be restored, and that those who possessed power had responsibilities to those who did not. As the stellar drift prepared to leave Meridian 7, its mission of liberation complete, Marcus felt the full weight of what they had become. He was no longer a freelance cargo hauler struggling to make ends meet. He was the human partner of the last free dragon, crew member of a living ship that defied conventional understanding, and one of the founding members of a new Guardian network that would either save galactic civilization or die trying. The stars stretched out before them, full of worlds that needed liberation and allies who were waiting to be awakened. The dragon had remembered who she truly was, and the galaxy was about to remember why legends never truly die. They simply wait for the right moment to return. Behind them, Meridian 7 began the long process of rebuilding, its population free for the first time in decades. Ahead lay a galaxy full of challenges that would test everything they had become. But as Marcus felt Harmony's presence flowing through their shared consciousness, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Human and dragon, bonded by respect and united by purpose, exactly as it was always meant to be. The age of the Guardians had begun again, and this time they would not abandon their responsibilities to the stars. Bought for 3 credits and marked useless, the dragon awakened when a mechanic showed respect. HFY.